Hi everyone, my name's Adam Kosh, and welcome to the second week of Android Design in Action. For those of you who don't know me, I work on the developer relations team on Android here in New York. I'm joined by Nick Butcher in London, who is to my left over there. How's it going, Nick?
Good to see you, Adam.
So thanks for joining us. For those of you who aren't familiar with the show, this show is sort of designed to follow on from Rita Meyer and Ian Lewis' show that they have on Friday called the App Clinic, where they look at a number of different apps. And what we're trying to do here is sort of reimagine, redesign some of the screens in those apps. Nick, anything else to add?
No, this is the second time we've done this show, so we're still feeling our way around the best way to do things. So if you have any comments, feedback on what you'd like to see, if there's something you'd like to see more of, then let us know. But yeah, the real goal is to really use these kind of app makeovers to demonstrate how you can use Android design in your everyday kind of apps.
Yeah, and I want to give a special shout out to Jeff Posnick, who's actually running all the fancy equipment for us today. You should listen into his show as well on the YouTube API, which is generally weekly as well. One thing I did want to quickly mention is that some people asked some questions about how we sort of set up the show, what kind of equipment we're using here, and I just wanted to say that we're using this very fancy tablet here. It's called the Motorola Zoom to show our screenshots, right? And it's plugged in through HDMI and fed into a sort of central system here that loops in all the different video feeds. So with that, let's get started. Today's focus is is stopwatch and timers. So hopefully you watched the App Clinic last week and saw some of the apps that they went over. Why don't we switch over to the demo? All right.
Great, yeah. So as you said, last Friday, Ian and Rito took a look at a number of stopwatch and timer apps and gave their opinions on what they liked, what they were looking for in their applications, and what they didn't like. So the first application we're looking at here is called Hybrid Stopwatch and Timer. So this came out as one of Ian and Rito's favorite applications. They enjoyed the functionality and the design and the big feature graphic on their market page. So what we've done here is we've taken a look at it and said, yeah, it's got some pretty good functionality, but there's a few ways which we would like to see Android design applied to it. So taking a quick look at the screenshot here, you can see the stopwatch page, which lets you start a stopwatch using the big red button in the middle, as well as record a number of laps and reset. And it gives you that time up at the top, and it shows you your latest lap time in the orange bar just below. If you want to go to the subsequent page, on the right, you can see that you also list out all the lap times you recorded during your session. So we looked at this, and the first thing that strikes me really is it's quite what we would kind of refer to as a skeuomorphic design. So it's really kind of trying to imitate real life in a digital surrounding. And while that can be great for bootstrapping users' mental models, getting them to instantly see something familiar and recognize it, you have to be aware that when you use this kind of design, it's also going to bring across people's the limitations of the physical world. They're going to start, if you have a book application that looks just like a book, a real book, you can't really just copy the text or do a Wikipedia search for a certain word. So those kind of features might not become obvious or might not sit very well with a design which is really skeuomorphic. So there's pluses and minuses to this kind of school of design. It's also quite associated with the iOS world. Another thing we noticed is there's quite a liberal use of gradients throughout the application. So every kind of bar and so on has this kind of textured gradient feel, which doesn't quite sit at home in the Android look and feel, the hollow design philosophy really. And from a technical point of view, we've noticed that it's not targeting the latest versions of Android. So it's using the legacy menu button, as you can see emulated down the bottom. And if we go to the next slide, Adam, you can see if you pop open the menu, they're actually using that as one of the primary means of navigation. So this isn't really very advised. Not everyone's going to look under the menu button for navigation. They might not even realize that there are other features in the application, such as the timer and some advanced preferences in here. So what we'd really like to see them do is move towards the latest APIs, which would be using an action bar to expose these kind of functionality and navigation controls on screen. Also, if they target the latest APIs, they'd benefit from the latest Holo themes and styles. So things like the updated scroll bar styles and new text fonts and so on. They would benefit from all this modern look and feel. How about that, Adam? Do you have any other thoughts about the look and feel of the hybrid stopwatch and timer app?
Yeah. So to me, like the actual stopwatch itself looks quite nice. As you say, it's sort of trying to mimic real world object. But when they go and actually show the lap times, and then they have to reuse those gradients to really make it sort of look the same as that stopwatch, that's when it sort of the design starts to fall apart, if you ask me. It just doesn't look quite as nice. It doesn't really fit with the Android system at that point. So I mean, it's a choice every designer and developer needs to make when they design their app. It's totally a valid choice. If you think it serves your users better that way, then that's totally fine. So that's sort of the design piece of it. As far as sort of the navigation or sort of getting around the application, as you said, they're using the old style menus, and to me, that's not like a sort of visual design aside. Navigation in this app is sort of very difficult. It's one of the reasons why the menu button has sort of been deprecated now. It's sort of very difficult to find those additional features in the application. And I think the guys mentioned this in the App Clinic on Friday. But not all devices have soft on-screen buttons down the bottom. So, for example, the HTC One X device will show that menu button sort of as a horizontal button taking up the entire bottom portion of the screen. It sort of instantly makes your application look kind of not up to date, not using the latest Android API versions.
The button of shame, I think they call it on the App Clinic, right?
Is that what they call it? Yes, the button of shame.
So, what did we do with it?
All right. And I should mention that our sort of favorite pixel pusher, Roman Urich, is off on vacation. I guess we let him have one day off from work. But he's here in spirit because this design was actually something he worked on last week. So here we go.
Ta-da!
Ta-da! The grand reveal. So I guess I can talk through sort of the navigation elements first, and then maybe Nick, you can add some comments. So what you see at the top, you've got the action bar, which we love, the sort of anchor of the screen. You've got the icon in the top left corner, the branding. And then right next to that, you've got the sort of top level navigation. So in this case, it's a spinner with the currently selected item, which is the stopwatch. Right next to that, you have an action item, reset, and the action overflow. And then what we've done here is underneath, there's two tabs, which allow you to sort of easily navigate between the actual timer itself and the different lap times, or the sort of list view collection of the particular object. And then obviously you've got the nice holo theming sort of throughout the whole application there. It's worth noting that actions like stop and lap, they could be in the action bar, but because they're so important and so critical to this application, it sort of warrants pulling them out and having them in a more visible and easily accessible place. Nick, thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, this instantly jumps out as just feeling right at home in the Android look and feel. I think the application of the holo styling married with a kind of accent color, which we picked out from the original application, so the kind of orangey browny colors from the original application, we used those to kind of hint the default holo widgets set and create the clock face. And I just think it instantly looks much more Androidy to me. So like you say, I like the use of the action bar because instantly it feels familiar to me. I instantly know how to switch modes between timer and stopwatch just by looking at this. Incidentally, because this app has these two different modes you can run it in, timer and stopwatch, having that name right up there in the title next to the icon is super useful. So if I am switching back to the application from recents, for example, I have the name echoed back to me right there, so straight away I know which mode I'm in. I think pulling out the lap times into a separate tab makes them much more visible. I don't have to kind of discover them under the menu and switch to them, and they're instantly there and just to swipe away, so you can use the horizontal swipe to get to them. So it's really kind of brought that functionality out. Looking at the stop and lap, I kind of consider that like the split action bar almost. So for me, it feels like an extension of the actions in the application. But what's great about this is they've really pulled out the key actions, starting and stopping, as a much larger tap target. It kind of like makes the most important things you do in the app, like starting and stopping for a stopwatch, super easy and like front and center. The other thing I really like about this redesign that Roman's done is the use of typography. So this is something we keep on going on about, but using different weights and colors of typography to give structure and emphasis to the application. So I found in the old application, so on the left-hand side, all its leading 0 digits I find add noise, so I find it harder to read it and quickly understand the time. Whereas in the redesign, using a different color or weight for the font, you can really make the important information stand out.
Yeah, definitely.
So for me, that's some of the major benefits. One thing to talk about is we've obviously not included the advert in the redesign, which obviously helps it feel a bit cleaner. But thinking about that, I was thinking you could easily just include the advert when it's in the non-running mode. So for example, when you're actually using the stopwatch and it's running, you'd be able to kind of clear that away and have a very clean interface. And in the kind of like downtime, when you're between actually running stopwatches, you could pop it in. So if we go on to the next page as well, we've taken a quick look at the lap times as well. Here we go. So Roman's done the same redesign, applied the same treatment to the second tab here. So here we can see, rather than using all these different gradients, we've gone for a much flatter, hollow style again, and really, really cut down on all the chrome and just let the content kind of stand out. So one of my favorite aspects of this design is the use of color. So you can see here we've picked out using green and red to show the fastest and slowest lap times. So instantly, once you break away from the kind of constraints of having all these or this chrome or the gradients surrounding the content, it lets you do more interesting things with the content and let it kind of shine.
Yeah, that's a really
Any
good
other
point.
thoughts, Adam?
Yeah, so two other things I wanted to quickly mention. One, I really like the share action directly in the action bar there. So you can quickly share out, your lap times and whatnot. I believe before it was in. Okay, there was no way to actually share before, I guess, using the regular menu. But that's a really nice addition. And the other thing is, a lot of people will ask me about sort of, I guess, second level navigation, or how can I add a filter to my application to sort of a list. So for example, in a movie application, you might have top movies and then you want to filter by genre, but you want to have it all on the same screen. So what was added here is a secondary spinner or drop down underneath the action bar, where you can choose lap time or total time. And I think this is a really nice way of sort of adding an easy way to sort of change or filter the content on that particular screen. It's really clear that it falls underneath the lap times on the right side. It doesn't apply to everything. And it's just a really easy way and visually simple way to sort of tell the user that there's a way to change the visuals on that particular screen. The other option, which I've seen used, which is also a decent option, is to actually put something in the action bar, which is tied to the fragment that sort of sits on that tab. It could be like a little filter icon or something, and clicking that would again pull a little drop down, which you could quickly use to change something on that particular screen.
Great.
What else?
I think also just having the laps and the stopwatch on the same hierarchical level of each other on separate tabs is great, because you can obviously have the stopwatch still running and switch over to have a quick look at the lap times you've done and switch back to the still running stopwatch. And it's much more apparent that these are siblings in the kind of hierarchy when they're on tabs, rather than the old design when you were perhaps having to go in and out of different screens and you couldn't see those two elements on screen at the same time. So I could see a way of, you could perhaps decorate the stopwatch icon in the redesign, like make it glow somehow or have a different highlight state to show that the stopwatch is still running or stopped, and indicate that at the same time because it's on screen.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I guess one last thing I just want to quickly mention was, I think you kind of mentioned this before, but sort of the use of typography and also the font sizes. For example, this screen where you've got the sort of stopwatch and lap time, it's very small, not much padding around it. It's kind of difficult to see. Whereas in the redesign, you can very easily make out the lap time there. And then the same on this screen. you've got list view on the left side on the old design taking up just 3 rows, yet it's sort of hard to sort of read the text. There's not a lot of padding. There's not a lot of it's sort of visually not easy to break out.
It might be a case where you want to look at the data if you have analytics in your application and see how many lap times people often record and use that kind of sizing information to inform your decision. I mean, here we're kind of making the assumption that 5 or 6 lap times at most are going to be shown, but else you might end up running out of room. But
that's true. That's a good point.
Cool.
Excellent. So should we move along here?
Yeah. So this next application is called Impetus, and it's an interval timer. So it's an application for people doing workouts, pretty much, where you want to do repeated intervals of a workout. So we're going to take a look at one particular screen in this application, which is kind of the edit screen, which lets you set up one of these interval sessions. So taking a look here on the screen on the left, you can see we're in an edit tab for editing a particular setup, and it lets you enter a period of prep before your interval training session, and then a number of rounds of an interval that you're going to go through, made up of work and rest periods, and then a cool down at the end, giving you a total. And what happens to edit these values, each of these kind of rows per se, are tappable, clicking on which launches a pop-up that you see on the next screen, which gives you a spinner and the option to kind of either go back to the screen and choose another time to set, or use the arrow buttons to advance back or forth between the different sections. So taking a look at this, Adam, do you want to give any initial thoughts on this first screen?
So first of all, they are using our action bar, and they're sort of they have our design, our tab designs and whatnot there. So that's a great start. I think the guys on Friday mentioned this as well. As far as this sort of I guess workflow goes, going through and adding all these things, to me it seems sort of like a lot of work, like a lot of tapping, a lot of changing. It's not really when I see all these fields and I know I have to configure them all. To me, it's sort of already in my head mentally. It makes it feel like a lot of work to me. I do like how they added the arrows, so that's their sort of attempt to make it easy to quickly navigate through different things. But I'm not sure if it like really it really solves the problem of quickly getting through and configuring all these things.
To expand on that, feeling hard, for me, it's kind of what you would refer to as a mode problem, because in the first instance you launch the app, you come in and you see a particular timer, and then you have to hit the edit tab, which is like going into edit mode. So it's like, you're already a mode on top of the standard timer, and then every time you hit edit, there's a pop-up which comes up on top, which is like a mode on top of the mode in my mind. So this is kind of,
must go deeper.
when you're putting all these different layers on top of each other, you're asking the user to hold a lot of state in their mind, which is what makes it feel kind of hard to use, or hard to kind of keep it all in your mind at once. So that's one of the main problems which we've really tried to address with it. Some other minor stuff I wanted to call out from the page as well is they had a good attempt at kind of theming the hollow look and feel. So you can see they've used the orange accent on the tab bar, for example, which picks out the color schemes from their icon, which is great, lovely. But they haven't quite taken that further throughout the application. So you see when the pop-up comes up to show the time, they're using the standard hollow dark blue accents. So because you have these two different color accents on screen, for me that kind of feels a bit like a clash, and like they haven't really gone far enough with the customizations. I'd like to see that kept consistent throughout, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. And just on that, they are using the sort of dialogue header from the Holo theme, but then everything below that in the dialogue kind of just doesn't conform to the sort of standard Holo theme at all. You've got this custom time picker, which is sort of lighter in color, and then below that you've got 3 buttons which aren't the sort of standard dialogue buttons from the Holo theme either.
Yeah, if there was a dialogue, I'd expect to see the button bar style, where you have just the outline separating like the OK, cancel, standard buttons, or whatever the buttons might be. And another one, it might sound minor as well, but just looking at the main screen on the left, the alignment feels really off. It feels like the total isn't kind of aligned to the things below it. And then within each of the rows, the text is kind of hard aligned to the left and not quite center aligned vertically. So for me, just looking at it, it just feels kind of unwieldy. It doesn't feel very, very regular or very even at all. There's no extra weight given to total, even though that is, totaling up what's going on. And at first blush, it might not be obvious that rounds refers to the 8 rounds refer to the work and rest periods, but not to the cool down or prep. That they're kind of separate to those things. There's no kind of grouping or anything there. So for me, there's quite a lot going on. It's not particularly aligned to make it easy to scan and understand what's going on.
Yeah, and then we have a recommended standard padding that you sort of have and use around the different text fields. And you can see here it's just the text fields are sort of up against the sides of the screen on both sides. So some padding there would definitely help as well.
Right, so on to the redesign.
All right, here we go. Is that synced over for you now?
Yeah, I can see it now. Cool. So what we've gone for here with a redesign is
so one quick thing. Our very own Nick Butcher did this redesign, so good stuff there, Nick. Go ahead.
In Roman numeric's absence is a poor substitute, but I do what I can. So what we've gone for here with this redesign is more like a wizard style. So the idea here is that you come into this summary screen showing you what the summary of the workout is, and then you can swipe right to go through each of the individual sections that you can configure, and each of which contains a number picker, letting you set it. So we've gone for like a scroll bar indicator at the bottom as well to indicate that there is this horizontal scrolling affordance, very similar to the home screen, the default home screen you might have in the Launcher app on Android. And also clicking on each of the items would jump you to the right section. So the idea here is, instead of having to go in and out of each of the sections with dialogue popping up, being dismissed, a new dialogue popping up, being dismissed, you have this one kind of consistent wizard feel that lets you configure the whole thing, and then you're done. And speaking of done, instead of having it as a kind of mode within the main UI, as a tab within the main UI, we've launched this as its own separate activity and used a pattern copied from contacts and calendar applications, where we have this done and discard bar at the top. So instantly this bar stays the same, and you know how to dismiss it and say, yes, I'm done, or no, get rid of this. So any thoughts, Adam?
Yeah, I really like the sort of layout you've chosen here with the big edit timer. Sorry, the little thing is coming. And then you've also like bolded and made the sort of total time really noticeable and easy to read. As far as the actual wizard goes, I think that's a pretty unique take on it. Something that's traditionally pretty mundane, like filling out a bunch of fields, like in a sort of preference style screen. You've taken and really made it into something more interesting. So just so I've got this right, the initial screen is a summary. And then you can either start swiping across to edit each of them one by one, or if you want to jump to a specific one, you just tap on it and it'll slide across to the correct field. Is that right?
Yeah, if you show us the next slide on the Zoom.
Bingo.
There we go. So here's an example. If you tap on the rounds link on the summary, for example, it'll pan you across to the right page, and you'll get a standard Android number picker. And so you can progress, keep on swiping across to go to the next ones. And as you can see at the bottom, there's the scroll bar affordance at the bottom, similar to the home screen, letting the user know where they are in the page, how far along they are, and also just signifying that there is this horizontal swipe affordance.
Yeah, and I definitely like how it's its own screen rather than being a sort of tab on the main screen. As you were talking about modes before, like, to me this is much clearer. It's almost like when I'm viewing a contact or editing a contact, I'm viewing a timer or editing a timer. So I really like that. And then I noticed you've got the sort of standard system number picker here as well, which is sort of fits in nicely with the holo theming.
Yeah, speaking of holo theming, we've really gone for using just typography and standard controls to give the application structure, rather than having these kind of bounding boxes which you used to have around the controls. So you can see we've used the different colors, for example, like on total and edit, to just make those stand out as important sections, rather than putting dividing lines in and so on, and lining things up really. So we've used the standard 48 dp rhythm here to give the application this kind of steady rhythm, which makes it much easier to scan and read and understand what's going on very quickly, and make certain things jump out, like the total time. We've also taken the orange accent color, which the original application used in the tab bar, and kind of run with it and really use that to theme everything. So from the standard number picker to the page title and the total bar, for example.
Excellent. I really like it. One question. So around the done and discard, I think we had a slide on this last week as well. Why the choice to show both at the same time rather than say push one into the overflow menu?
So the option, I would say that really comes down to the expected behavior here. So how is the user going to use this? If it's the kind of thing where they're going to come in and then want to get rid of what they've done is quite likely, then I think having discard as a primary option works very, very well. If it's something where they expect to back out and not have it discard what they've done, but have it just cancel the edit. So think about editing a contact, for example. You want to have a big done button at the top, but you're very unlikely to want to actually just completely discard. Then that kind of justifies putting it under the overflow. The other option as well is obviously because this pattern takes up the entire action bar at the top. If you did have other actions that you wanted to put under the overflow button, for example, you couldn't really have room for both the large buttons and the overflow. So that's a case where you might want to pick the most likely candidate as a standout one, like maybe just the done button, and then have other options under the overflow.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I guess I don't know the sort of way that users would. I guess you'd have to analyze how users use this application, but if it was unlikely to undo, be a common action to discard what you find there, I'd say push it into the overflow menu. Have done as the primary action. That also means that, say, if the user hits the back button, they know that we're going backwards and we're going to save whatever state was there rather than not knowing if it's going to be done or discard. But,
absolutely. My take on this was that this is the kind of application where you're going to install it. You're going to go in and set up a bunch of interval times. These are the workouts, which I like to do.
Yep.
So you're going to go in there and do a bunch of them, and you're probably just going to set them up. And you either were going to save it, say yeah that's it, or you're just going to decide, oh no, that's not what I wanted, discard it, throw it away. There's not actually going to be a lot of curation. You're not really going to be coming in and out and changing it very much. So this is why I went for the plain done and discard. If you did think that people were going to be curating them using it a lot more, then you might go for the pattern with just the done button and discard under the overflow.
Excellent. Well, I think we're almost out of time. We don't have any more slides. So any other last thoughts, Nick, before we sort of call the show for this week?
Yeah, so I wanted to use just a little bit of time that we have left just to go over a few headlines in the world of Android design and just pull out some activity that's been going on in the community and really highlight it. So for me, last week we had an event here in London called DevFest London, which is run by the local Google developer group, which is awesome to meet up with a bunch of Android developers, as well as one of my favorite Android designers called Marie Schweiss, who was over from Berlin, who draws lots of cute Androids and was going around the hackathon prettying up everyone's applications. So that was really awesome. But out there in the design world, I also wanted to call out an excellent blog post I saw last week from Yohani of AndroidUIPatterns.com. It's a fantastic blog. He did a great job of putting together a bunch of community tools which have been out there, put out there for helping you to customize the Holo controls, as well as using the Asset Studio to create a Holo-looking icon, and the Action Bar Generator Studio to customize your action bars. So he did a really, really nice post pulling those three brilliant tools together, showing how you can use them in conjunction to customize your app. So check out AndroidUIPatterns.com for that post.
Excellent. And this is not really new news this week, but something I just did want to quickly mention is the draw pattern, which is sort of becoming very popular recently. For those of you who don't know, there actually is a section up on the design site. It's under the action bar page, which has some information on our best practices around implementing a draw, how it should work. If you are building draws out there, I would encourage you to sort of look at that and try and follow those guidelines. Before everyone implements this pattern and does it differently, it would be good to standardize around that. We don't have any code samples out at the moment for the sort of best practice pattern, but at least the design site's been updated with some information there.
Yeah, I'd say the major takeaway for the draw pattern is look at the YouTube application as the best way right now, the best example we have of its implementation.
Yep.
So our advice is that the draw shouldn't move the action bar, because that's such an important kind of anchor in your application that you shouldn't be really shifting that in and out of the way. And the draw should kind of come from underneath that. And also that the draw should only be available from top level navigation items. So once you go down in your view hierarchy, you shouldn't have instant access to it, else it just ends up as like a bag of links rather than having any kind of structure to it. So those are my major takeaways and tips for implementing your draw patterns.
Fantastic. All right, well, we're out of time. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. See you guys.
Cheers. Bye.